Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us today for another Roth IAMS webinar. We're just going to give it a few more minutes and let some other folks join, and then we'll get going. Okay, so I think we're going to get started now. I know that we will probably have others continue to join, but respecting those who are already online, we'll get the webinar started. And today's webinar is another one in our series on accessibility, presented by Andrew Chow. I'm going to give you a couple of housekeeping notes before we get started. One, yes, we will be sharing a link to the recording as well as the deck following the webinar. I would like to tell you that chat always is open, so if you have a question along the way, just leave it in the chat, and at the end of the webinar there will be a time for questions and answers. Throughout the presentation there will be a couple of poll questions, and so if you could participate in that, we would appreciate that. That helps us understand just a bit more about the kinds of challenges you're facing or dealing with accessibility with your organization. And last of all, at the end, before you leave us, we would appreciate it if you would fill out our final survey, which helps us understand more about what you're looking for and what other webinars we can be doing for our audiences. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Andrew Chow. Take it away, Andrew.
Great. Thanks, Amanda. Well, as the slide says, my name is Andrew Chow. I'm the practice leader in accessibility. My practice falls under the Service Excellence Group, and we're responsible for putting the methodology and approach to our work, and also making sure that the quality is there, making sure our clients have defensible and consistent data. And it seems time flies, and I've been doing building condition assessments and accessibility audits for quite a number of years, and I'm still doing them. And as you see, I don't look as young as I'm in the picture. I'm also struggling with farsightedness as I get a little older, but that's how life is, I suppose. But enough about me. I'm sure you're here to hear more about accessibility. And before we dive into the main topic of universal design versus barrier-free, I'd like to go over an overview of disabilities. Because even before we look into this topic, we should understand what kind of disabilities are out there and what kind of challenges people are facing before we try to implement some improvements in improving our built environment. So I'll also go through the definitions of universal design and barrier-free, and although they're quite similar, but there are some nuances between them both that differentiate them between themselves. And there are design guidelines out there that are based on universal design, and some are based on barrier-free. We'll go through that. And I'm sure you may notice that there are all sorts of accessibility design guidelines out there. Which one should we follow? There are actually some minimum requirements that we have to follow. And at the end of the day, having all this information, what do you really need? What do you need for your organization? And how shall we implement these accessibility improvements? So we'll discuss those things as well. So a quick overview of disabilities. When we talk about accessibility, a lot of times we just think about wheelchair access or mobility. And that's not hard to imagine because even the international symbol of access is a person in a wheelchair. And so when we hear the word accessibility, very often, right off the bat, we'll just think about wheelchair access, or how do we provide wheelchair access, or do we build a ramp, do we build a bigger door, etc. But there are other disabilities that we should consider. And so when we're trying to improve our built environment, we shouldn't just focus on mobility, and we should also think about the other disabilities that are out there. There are some other disabilities, and some might not be very evident, and some are hidden. And there are other disabilities to consider, such as vision, and some people may have vision impairment and maybe not fully blind, but they have difficulty in seeing. Same goes with some hearing, and at times disabilities are caused by pain, etc. So there are quite a lot of disabilities, a wide variety of disabilities that we should consider when we're trying to improve our built environment. And then sometimes disabilities are not permanent. Sometimes they're temporary. Oftentimes it's caused by injury or illness. So, for example, if you've sprained your ankle before, if you've broken your arm, at that moment you have a disability, and that brings forth some inconvenience. And in one way or another, we will likely be affected by a disability in our lifetime. And oftentimes, when we talk about accessibility, we imagine that it affects a certain group of people. And typically, we may think about seniors because that's when usually you'll have more disabilities at that age group. Or you may think about people with some special needs that require some a special adjustment to their built environment. And we limit ourselves to that. But as we see, uh, as we just discussed, we quite a lot of people are affected by disability one way or another, and will need the built environment to accommodate that. And just going through some statistics, in Canada, more than a quarter of Canadians have some sort of disability. And you may think that youths may not have many disabilities, or not many youths are affected by disability. But based on the statistics, actually, the youth population experienced the largest increase in disability rate. So, of course, maybe they're not as affected by mobility and their disabilities are a little different. But nevertheless, quite a wide range of people are affected by disability. And we have to accommodate for everybody. And of course, different age groups have different challenges to deal with. So for youths, the disabilities are more predominantly mental health and learning. And then as you age and advance in years, more of that disability comes from pain or mobility issues, flexibility issues, etc. And so we're going to need a space that can accommodate as many disabilities as possible. And so not just mobility, we're going to have to accommodate for all ranges of ages and for different types of disabilities. And on the state side, it's a very similar story. There are many people that struggle with the same disabilities. And as you see, there is a wide range of disabilities. And in the States, 20% of the population struggle with a disability, and 66 million of them. That translates to 66 million. And that's more than the population of Canada. So throughout the world, in many places, we have to accommodate for these disabilities. Having learned all of that, having known all that, so now we come to universal design versus barrier-free. So which one should we do for to accommodate to improve our built environment? And when you talk about the accessibility, a lot of times you may hear about these two terms, and sometimes these terms are used interchangeably, but actually they have their own nuances and they're a little bit different. And so let's dive in. What's barrier-free access? So just coming straight out of the dictionary, barrier-free access is designed for those with physical or other disabilities, and you want to provide them alternate means of access. So if you have, let's say, some stairs to go through, maybe it's best to have a lift, have a ramp to accommodate that. Um, or you remove the barrier altogether. In the building codes, there are also some definitions. We want to provide a barrier-free access, which means that the facility can be approached for those with a physical or sensory disability. And the CSA standard, they've expanded that a little bit more. The same thing, it's about access for those with physical, sensory, or cognitive disabilities. So all in all, we want to remove the barrier. When we talk about barrier-free access, if there's a barrier there, that built environment has a barrier, we want to remove that barrier or provide an alternate means of access. And so that people who are going to the facility or they're traveling within the facility through the corridors, through the doors, etc., we and through different floors, they'll be able to have access with ease. And for the ADA, it is a very similar definition. They want to provide a continuous and unobstructed way of travel. So again, removing the barrier, removing that obstruction. So that's barrier-free access. Then universal design is a little different, and have a quote from Ronald Mace. He's one of the pioneers in universal design. And he conceptualized that things should be able to be used by a whole variety of people. So there should be design of products, environments, including the built environment, should be usable by all people, and you don't need to have it segregated by one particular group. So let's say maybe you have kitchen cabinets, you may built it that has some parts that are lower, some parts that are higher, so that it can accommodate different people. And it's still maybe a little bit hard to conceptualize, so I've come up with a couple of examples that will help us to understand what universal design is and contrast that with barrier-free accessibility. And you may have come across this situation before. You've come to a building and there are signs, maybe no signs of it. There is an accessible entrance at the side of the building, and sometimes, hopefully, there is some signage that directs people to that side access. And that's great. You have an accessible entrance for a person, and they can enter the building. And then you would meet the criterion of barrier-free accessibility. But in terms of universal design, that is not the best solution. Yes, you've given access to a person, but it's sort of as a segregated way to do it. So people with a disability, they have to intentionally use this side entrance instead of the main entrance to gain access. So for universal design, it is best that the main entrance is level and anybody can use that main entrance and they can go in and they don't have to go through a back entrance to get into the building. And a couple of other examples, things that we use day to day. So, for example, automatic door opener. I'm sure we all have used this before, whether we are in a wheelchair or not. We've used this device. It gives us a lot of convenience. Or door handles. And in my house, actually, I've changed quite a few of those doorknobs into a door handle, and it just makes things easier. You can open it at any time or anyway. It's much easier, and especially when my gout flares up, I'm able to open the door much more easier. So. Just very simple examples, even a motion sensor light switch. So those are typical day-to-day examples that we can use and that suit universal design. And another example, just to contrast between barrier-free accessibility and universal design, is a desk. So there are desks that are specifically for wheelchair users. They're lower, and then you can have a wider space between your legs to accommodate the clear space. But there are now there are other solutions nowadays. For example, this workstation that is gaining quite a lot of popularity. You can adjust the height with a touch of a button. So anybody can use that workstation. It doesn't have to be only for a person in a wheelchair. So that would be a universal design solution because more people are able to use that particular element. So now it's just time for a quick poll question, a very simple question. We're going to talk about accessibility design guidelines. And do you know which one applies to your jurisdiction? So yes or no, or it doesn't really matter. I just want to pick the best one that suits my needs, and that's fine. So yeah, pick A, B, or C. See which one falls into your situation. And I'll just give a quick few seconds for that. All right. It seems that most of us are not certain which one applies to your jurisdiction. So uh, then definitely this is a good topic to go into. So I'll continue on to the guidelines. So we've talked about universal design and barrier-free access. There are design standards that are based on each one. So I'll first talk about the ADA, the standard that's in the US. So they have a federal guideline, which is under the ADA. Under the ADA, there is the accessible design standard, and that applies to buildings throughout the country. Now, of course, you may still have some state requirements, and that will have to be looked into. And of course, if you need some assistance in that, so we be happy to help you out and to find which one applies to your jurisdiction. So under the ADA, it's about removing the barrier. So they want to provide access to individuals who require accessibility, and they can access the sites and facilities and buildings, etc. So this applies to all sorts of sites and buildings. And if you look into the advisory, one point that I've extracted is that they want to remove the barriers in existing facilities. So for existing buildings, we want to improve the built environment by removing the barriers. So it's barrier-free access for the most part. Now in Canada, the situation is a little different. The buildings are not governed by a federal act per se. So each province has its own accessibility act. And the map, you'll see that there are provinces colored in blue, and these are the provinces that currently have accessibility act. And the accessibility act will drive the design standard. There is a federal one, a federal act, but that applies to federally owned buildings, a crown building. So the situation is a little different there. For the most part, the building is going to be built in accordance to the provincial building code. So the Accessibility Act is going to govern the requirements in the building code. It enforces the requirements in the building code. And then within the building code, you'll find the design requirements. For example, a ramp. They'll tell you how wide a ramp should be, how long it should be, what's the slope should be, etc. So it all falls under legislation. Well, other than the building code, there is a facility accessibility design standard. And so in 2007, the City of London published a facility accessibility design standard, or called FADS, and they applied it to their own buildings, or whether they leased it or not, or just operate the buildings. They wanted to apply these design standards. And these design standards are based on universal design. And at the time, they also wanted to be more stringent than the building code to exceed the requirements of the building code. So they came up with their own design standards. They've also included some requirements that are not covered under the building code. So for example, you'll find in the FADs some design requirements for meeting rooms, cafeterias, etc., or specific types of facilities like fire stations, police stations. And particularly in Ontario, this is where it started with the FADs. And after that, there are quite a lot of organizations out there that create their own FADs, like Brock University, etc. And I think OCAD recently, a couple of years ago, had their FADs. And a lot of it was built on the City of London one, and you'll find a lot of similarities. And in recent years, different municipalities, different organizations have now come to design their own fads. And City of London itself made a new one in 2021. And adding to all of this, there's still the Canadian Standards Association. They also came out with a standard called CSAB 651. And in 2023, they updated this standard. Again, it's more trying to be more broader scope than the building code, Ontario Building Code. And a couple of organizations follow this reference. For example, the Rickenson Foundation or the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation. They refer to this standard. So also to add on, even the building code, they will reference some CSA standards for, let's say, elevators or your wheelchair lifts. Now, having all those standards out there, they're fads, and I know in the poll question, some people may think, "Oh, I just picked the best one. If I pick the most stringent one, that should be the best." But actually, there are some minimum requirements. So at the end of the day, you have to follow the building code because that's a legislated requirement. And that is enforced. The fads are not as enforced per se. So minimally, you need to follow the building code. You need to follow the design requirements that are there. So it's good that you can choose a more stringent requirement, but you still have to keep in mind, make sure at the end, once the improvements are done, it should follow the building code. So also know the different requirements that are within your jurisdiction. So, of course, let's say you're in the province of Ontario, then definitely follow the Ontario Building Code, follow the AODA. And if your municipality has its own design standard, like City of London, City of Mississauga, City of Toronto, etc., and see if those are mandatory for your facility. And then if you're in the States, definitely follow the ADA. So before you plan your space, before you plan your improvements, understand what the requirements are. Now is just another time just for another poll question. This one is a little more in detail. So we just like to understand what kind of stage you're at in your accessibility journey. And maybe you're just getting started. Maybe you're just trying to discover the topic of accessibility, just trying to understand more of it. Maybe you're trying to assess the needs of your organization, just to try to see what kind of disabilities you have to accommodate. Maybe you're trying to make your own fads, make your own design standard, or trying to pick a particular design standard that will best work for your organization. Or perhaps you're very advanced in your accessibility journey and you're already implementing accessibility audits, and through the accessibility audits, you're implementing the improvements based on those recommendations. So just take some time to take a look at the question, and we'll see where we're at. And I know it's a little long question. I'll just give a little longer, just in case people need to just understand the different answers. Okay, it's I guess so it's quite good. A lot of you, it seems that you're already planning the improvements, you're prioritizing the recommendations. So that's great. So and it is good for particularly if you're in Ontario, that'd be great because we were supposed to meet the goal in 2025, but so it's good. It's good to see. So let's see, let's determine what kind of organizational needs you have. So after understanding you have to follow some design requirements, whether it's legislative ones or whether it's a fads, and also understanding what kind of disabilities you need to accommodate for. What are the things that your organization needs? So first, we should determine some objectives. So should we go with barrier-free or universal design? What kind of standards should we meet? Should we use the FADs or just building code? And also, even if we know all these issues from by using the standards, how feasible is it for us to make all these improvements? And I think that is one of the key things organizations are struggling with is how feasible is it to improve the facility? We should look into the demographics of your organization or the people that your organization serves. So, what are the ages? What kind of roles does this population have, etc.? What kind of existing disabilities are there? Now, you may say, oh, well, of course I'm going to choose universal design. That's the best because it accommodates everybody. It will accommodate a wide range of people. But then, unfortunately, it might not be the best solution at the time because of, let's say, your demographics of your organization. And sometimes it's not feasible to implement universal design. Now, so for example, going back to that uh, building with the side entrance, accessible side entrance, it is likely not feasible to reconstruct those stairs at the main entrance and make it a ramp or add a lift. It is unfortunately just more feasible to make the side entrance accessible. And then sometimes it's structurally not feasible and financially not feasible. So for example, if your elevator is one of those older ones, you can't reconstruct your elevator shaft and build a new elevator. It's just not feasible. So unfortunately, sometimes the improvements are not feasible for us to implement universal design. So we gotta look at what we can do. And one key hindrance again is the your finances. Unfortunately, there's not all the funding in the world to make all these improvements, and we're going to have to look at what we can do. And so, in these cases, if there is limited funding, we should have some targeted improvements. We should look at specific types of improvements to implement. So again, we're going to have to analyze our demographics. We're going to have to look at, let's say, age. So if your organization or the people that you serve is a whole wide range of people of various ages, then universal design may be best because then you can accommodate more people. But if your demographics are more narrow, so let's say you're a school, elementary school, let's say, or you have a senior home, and then you'll want targeted improvements. So let's say in the senior's home, maybe you'll want to implement automatic door openers wherever you can because a lot of times seniors are going to struggle with the flexibility part or trying to open a door or trying to push a very heavy door. So we want to target those needs first. So you're going to have to look at the age population of your population. And sometimes you might have to look at the roles. So if your organization has a lot of people who does office work, so maybe you want to focus on the workstations. So instead of trying to improve the built environment, maybe you want to improve the workstations, install those workstations that can go up and down, and so you can accommodate that kind of need. And maybe schools, you might need a sensor room, or maybe in some organizations, you have people that have immediate needs. You have someone right now that has a certain need, and you need to accommodate that person. So if there is limited funding, you may need to go with a targeted approach. And now you've had all these information, you know there are a lot of standards out there, and you gotta then evaluate your built environment. So how should we do it? So there are a couple of ways we've come up with this approach. So one, we can do a baseline screening accessibility checklist, or we can do a more detailed audit, a comprehensive accessibility audit, or we can do a Rick Hansen survey. And to choose between these ones, we have to look at what the objectives are again. So the baseline screening checklist, that's good at a very high level. So let's say you have a lot of buildings in your portfolio, and you just want to get a good understanding of how accessible your portfolio is. So this would be a good way to do it. Just a couple of simple questions, and we can gauge how accessible the facilities are. Unfortunately, if you want to make a targeted approach, you want to identify the areas that need improvement, then this one is not the best. So we would have to go through the comprehensive accessibility audit. And this way, we're going to compare the barriers in your facility line by line with the code or line by line with the FADs. So, for example, we need to look at the ramp. We're going to look at the slope. Once we measure the slope, let me compare that with the standards that are out there, the standards that your organization is choosing, and we can determine whether that element is accessible or not. And if wherever there is non-compliance, we can quickly identify those areas that need improvement. And another type of assessment that's gaining some traction nowadays is the Rick Hansen survey, as developed by the Rick Hansen Foundation. And I like to give this sort of analogy. It's sort of like your lead credits. So if you have certain elements, you gain credits, and at the end, you can get a certification. So it works in a similar way. Uh, Through the survey, we can see how accessible or the facility is, and at the end, they'll have an overall score based on the overall score of each section. Now, one thing to note, though, the survey doesn't particularly address guidelines based on code, so the objective, the approach is a little different. And so this survey is good. You can get understanding with a quantitative value of how accessible your facility is. And this survey is based on universal design, and so you can also see how it is compared to universal design. And you can showcase your ratings on the Rick Hansen Foundation registry. And so this is a good way to advertise your facility. And so I would recommend this if you have a facility that is public facing and you want to advertise it to the public and you want people to come. I think this would be a good way, and you can showcase your facility. So let's say a library, a community center, an arena. These would be good facilities to do it. But if you have a facility that's not really visited by others, I like to say just an office space, and maybe this is not the one. You would probably just want to do a detailed audit. So all in all, before we improve our facility, we have to determine the objectives of the organization. Do we want to go with universal design, or do we want to go with barrier-free? And of course, we're going to have to meet the requirements of the local jurisdiction. So even if you've chosen a FADS that is more stringent than code, just make sure that when you're designing and after you have constructed that new element, make sure that it meets the local jurisdiction. Make sure that the requirements are met because those are legislated requirements. And when you're doing an assessment of your facility, just choose one that best suits for your organization, whether it's just building code or whether you want to include another FADS upon it. And of course, assess the existing facilities, then you can identify which areas need improvement. And then after all that, take those recommendations from these assessments and make those improvements. And hopefully that will continue our journey on making a more inclusive built environment. So that brings us to the Q&A section. But before we dive into that, I just want to give a friendly reminder, if you can fill in that survey at the end, that would be best, and it will just help us to improve our webinars. and provide you information that you need. And if you have any specific questions, you can also reach out to me, andrew.cha@rothimes, or you can just send it as an email to accessibility@rothimes.com. If you have questions about accessibility, if you have any suggestions on topics that you want to know about, please feel free to reach out. And we really want to help you in your accessibility journey and make sure that we can all together build an environment that can accommodate many people. And so I'll just leave a time to questions. Not sure. Don't see any in the chat.
Yeah, Andrew, I don't see
Uh,
any coming in the chat, and I don't see
mhm,
any raised hands.
mhm,
We can just give it another minute or so. If you do have a question and want to put it in the chat, please do, and Andrew can answer it.
mhm. Again, no pressure. Is definitely you can also reach out to us afterward. But if you do have a question now, please feel free to ask.
Oh, Sam has his hand
Okay.
up. Um, I'm not sure. Can we turn on Sam's mic, Gurpreet? Oh, here's a good question, Andrew. Why don't you
Oh,
answer this one? Are
I know a
there,
very good company that does it. But yes, actually, we do the three types of services that I have mentioned: the Rick Hansen survey, the comprehensive accessibility audit, or the baseline screening checklist. Even so, it depends on your organization's needs, and if you want more information on that, definitely please reach out and we can do that.
and what are we,
And
oh,
Sam, wasn't sure if.
Sam says your mic is active now, Sam, so you can speak.
Thank you. We're in the boardroom with 7, 8 people.
Oh, okay, great.
Thank you for this. Tagri has a question. So I'm going to pass to her.
Hi, I just want to see, like, would you mind sharing your screen now to see if you do have any template regarding your assessment or a sample of the reports that you are developing once it's requested?
Sure. I believe we have some redacted reports and checklists on hand. I don't have them with me right now, but we do have them in record. We can send them along.
Yeah,
I
Sam,
believe so.
if you want to contact Andrew at the, if you can flip to the last slide there, if you want to reach out to Andrew at that address, then he will be able to talk to you about that further.
Yeah, sorry, let
Sounds
me
good.
go back to that slide. There we go.
Do I find Andrew's? Oh, yeah, here. Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions from your end, Sam? Wasn't sure if there are any others in the boardroom. I guess not.
No, doesn't look like it. Give it another minute.
Mm-hmm.
And then if there are no other questions, we'll wrap for today. And as I said, take a snap of this screen and you can reach out to Andrew at any time. Okay, seeing no more questions, why don't we wrap up for the day, Andrew?
All right, thanks. Thanks everyone for attending. It's a pleasure to have you here. And definitely, if you have any more questions, please reach out and hopefully we can assist you in any way. Have a good day, everyone.